St. Andrew's College is an affirming ministry of the United Church of Canada. We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. This verbal acknowledgement is one concrete action that symbolizes our commitment to the work of reconciliation.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome tonight on an evening where the light is still shining out there. I think this is our first Year of Intention event where we're actually still in the remaining daylight hours. So it's good to have you all here tonight. Lots of names in the participant list. It's great to see everybody. So this is our final webinar in our Year of Intention series. And tonight we've got another great event happening. We've got a panel of amazing parents who are going to be sharing their own life stories and sharing their faith, really, about the joys and challenges of raising trans and non-binary young people in these troubled and even, dare I say, dangerous times. So it's going to be a really special panel tonight. We're really looking forward to hearing from folks. Dr. Kayko is going to be moderating the panel and introducing the panelists to us. But before I turn it over to her, I'd invite us maybe just to take a few moments to get ourselves centered, to take a few moments of silence and to take a few breaths together, have a short time of prayer and also acknowledgement of the lands and the places and the treaties where we are. So let's just breathe together for a few minutes. And as you breathe, I'd invite you just to relax your body as you can. Maybe roll your shoulders a bit because it's been a long day, probably a busy day for a lot of folks. Just breathe deeply, and I'd invite you to imagine yourself as a tree. And imagine your feet growing roots out from beneath you. And as you breathe, you just feel those roots going down through the floor, going down into the earth that is starting to awaken as we come very near to the equinox. The earth that, though covered still in many places with snow and ice, is responding to the change of light, change of temperature. And we know that spring and spring's sister, resurrection, are both on their way. So we feel ourselves rooted in the land. We give thanks for the land where we are. It is all sacred land. And we give thanks for where there are treaties. We give thanks for the treaties that invite us into this place, that allow us to be here together. We give thanks for the first peoples who share this land so graciously with us. And we recommit to building justice, to building right relationships, and to building harmony with all of our neighbors. Spirit, breathe through us this night. Bind us together with you, with each other, with the land, and with all who struggle for justice. This day and always may it be so. Amen. Amen. All right, Dr. Kayko, over to you.
Thank you, Sean. So welcome to everybody. I will be the facilitator for this evening's panel discussion. We have some wonderful mothers here who are also people of faith who are raising trans children or parenting, mothering, nurturing, caring for. Some of the children are older than others, so we're very we try to be mindful of that. So we have 3 people with us, and I'm going to just briefly introduce all of them and then invite them all to say their stories. Um, we will have 15 minutes for each person to share stories, and then I will lead us all in some conversation amongst the panel, about 20 minutes, and then we'll take questions from those of you who are attending. So I would ask, if you have questions while people are speaking, to just write them on a piece of paper and not put them in the chat. That can be difficult for people to focus on what they're saying. But once that part is done, when we open it up for general question and answers, then I'll invite you to put your questions into the chat if you don't want to raise your hands. So we have with us this evening, we have Allison. You want to give a little wave? There's Allison. Allison is a member of the United Church and is the mother of 3 and is engaged in advocacy work for people of diverse gender identities and sexualities. And she is with the United Church in Saskatchewan. We have Colleen. You want to give us a wave, Colleen? Colleen is with the Anglican Church. She's an Anglican, and she's the mother of a trans child who's an adult. So this is why I was saying parenting, not just mothering. And we're very pleased to have Colleen here. And Lynn is with us, also from Saskatchewan. And Lynn is a Lutheran pastor who is also the mother of a trans son. So we're very pleased to have everybody. And I am going to invite Allison to share her story with us first.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's really good to be here. So yes, I am from Saskatchewan. We are farmers. We live in a rural area. My children went to a school of a K-12 school with about 100 students in it, and so our context can be quite different than someone, I think, who's grown up in a city with a really large school. So we have a son and a daughter, and Andre, who came out to us as non-binary about 8 years ago when they were 16. And so when Andre first came out to us, they said they were pansexual, and then non-binary about a year later. And it's a journey. It isn't like this is who I am and this is what I want to be called. And there's a lot that goes on in those early years. For instance, when Andre was born, we called them Diana. When they were in high school, they asked to be Dee. When they went to university, they asked to be Griff. And now they chose a beautiful name, and it's Andre, and it's accompanied by a grandmother and a grandfather's name as middle names. So together we made the legal changes to documents when Andre was about 22. And life with a name that suits our child has made such a difference in their confidence, and when dealing with doctors and government employees and job applications. They just are so much more confident than they were being misgendered and misnamed. And yeah, so anyway, that's been a good thing. And just on an aside, they also got the X marker on a few of their documents, and they've traveled on their passport already into the US, and that went okay. That's just another thing parents worry about is how is that going to go. So Andre came out while they were in high school, but I would say that probably around 12 years old, started to struggle with their puberty, and just weren't comfortable. And I think it manifested into some digestive issues, and so we were looking for answers for the wrong thing. We weren't looking for. We did a lot of physical testing first, and then sort of said, well, is it something emotional that's bothering you? No, didn't think it was that. And so it took quite a while for them to figure out what was going on and how they were feeling different from their peers. And as I said, it was a K-12 school. There was 8 children in their classroom, so it you don't have a lot of economies of scale. You know what I mean? Like like they're probably the only one in that classroom, and yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how the coming out came. Um, during Andre is the youngest of ours, so had an older brother and sister that they were all involved in United Church activities, and did local events and provincial events and national events. And so as Andre grew up, sort of just followed in the footsteps. And when they were about 15, they were at a workshop in Ottawa or near Ottawa where they actually asked what everyone's pronouns were. And Andre was like, wow, like you can do that? Like you can say what your pronoun is? And it sort of opened up a whole world to like, what is this that you're talking about? And so we're very thankful for the workshops and just the radical inclusion that was given at that time. So that would have been about 2014. So about 10 years ago. So and actually our kids were learning, and we didn't know much about it until Andre came out, and then they were like, oh yeah, I heard about this. And so it was really for our child, it was a good way to learn with supportive adults and peers around. So having said that, though, that doesn't mean it was easy, but it gave Andre the language to figure out that they were non-binary, that they wanted to use they them pronouns, that every time they went to a United Church youth event, they knew they were going to be accepted as they were. And when they finally did sort of come out and tell us that they were non-binary, they were going to a youth event that weekend. And our older two kids were leaders at that. And so we made sure the older kids knew, and they were like, so good. Like I would say during the whole time, Andre's siblings and cousins and friends were the best at accepting this new name and new pronouns, and it just wasn't an issue. And so they are a great example to all of us to that's just who they are. We love them, and we're going to go forward from that. However, I did mention that Andre had some digestive issues early on, and then it sort of became more of some mental health issues with anxiety in high school, panic attacks. And again, we weren't always looking in the right places for the reasons for these things, but did what we could to find the counselor and give them that space that they needed. Before Andre came out to us, they were talking to a counselor at school, and they also had told a couple of friends. And so to me, this whole thing with parental rights and pronoun changes, I just think for us and for our child, it worked for them to have a counselor and teachers that they trusted and friends at school. And their counselor at school said one time, have you told your parents? And Andre said, no, I haven't. He said, well, do you think they'll be upset? And Andre said, no, I don't think so. Like, I just haven't got around to it. And I think that goes back to, I really think it has a lot to do with us having the United Church in our lives, that, since 1988, it was just understood that being queer was not a sin. And so it's just I actually didn't know what non-binary was when Andre came out to us, and I was kind of mad at myself that I didn't know that. I just sort of thought I was, kind of with it, but yeah, I didn't even know what that was. And so that was like, I was kind of mad at myself about that. But overall, Andre felt that it was safe, and it was safe at our local church as well. So yeah, that order of things, it isn't always parents first, right? Even though you're trying to help them figure things out, they're not necessarily telling you what it is that they're grappling with. So another thing that happened was I did all the things that parents are not supposed to do when your child comes out to you. Right away, I started crying, and it wasn't that I thought it was wrong that they were non-binary. It was that I was worried for them. It was fear and anxiety about what the future might hold, and that it wouldn't be easy. It's never easy, but it was going to make it a little less easy. The next thing I did was I wondered why we had to tell people. Like, it was like, it's your sexuality. Why do people need to know that? And Andre said, yeah, but but I want them to know the real me, and I want them to use my proper pronouns. And so that was, yeah, that was good. We accepted the name changes. D was easy. That was an easy one. We struggled with pronouns a little bit, just used the proper name for a long, long time instead of using pronouns. And it wasn't that we didn't agree with it. It was just resisting it, I think. And then I think just like with any teenager, you don't necessarily listen when your child wants to talk. And so I think that's, you don't always catch the nuances like what we felt as we maybe missed some things. Um, and then there's a lot of fear that went with that. And I think those first years were about that, the fear of the statistics surrounding 2S LGBTQ youth, and how that fear really kept us awake a lot of nights. Um, Not so much when they were in our care, but they left home and went to Vancouver for university right after high school, and that was tough. That was a long ways away, and just there was a lot of fear with that. And then the anxiety turned into depression, and there was a little bit of a breakdown. Well, not a little bit. There was a breakdown while they were at university, and we're trying to deal with what's going on, going out there trying to find mental health supports in a province you don't know the words to use when you're looking for when you're googling help. So yeah, that was another uh, thing to overcome. And then even now, just the fear of potential experiences in gendered battle, that is a real fear. And it's, yeah, we got to figure that out, guys. So um but Andre worked really hard for success in school and music, and was able to make some really difficult decisions as an adult, like leaving university and the course that they were interested in, where gender diverse people were not as accepted as they were advertised. Had to go for an interview to get into this university. We asked the questions, we saw the gender neutral bathrooms, but when it came right down to it, it wasn't as accepting as Andre expected. And then it was just hard to be. And they made that decision. They made a decision about where they were going to live after that, and it wasn't at home, even though we just wanted them to come home so we could take care of them. And then, since then, with employers, like setting boundaries and knowing what you can handle and what's right is good. And then also how much parents are allowed to meddle or not. Right? So that's been a learning experience, because you just want to do everything that you can to help them succeed, but sometimes they just need you to stay put. So um, another thing that changed in our journey was about Andre's 26 now, so it must be 3 or 4 years ago. They were diagnosed with ADHD, and so being assigned female at birth, that is often missed, and yeah, and so they were diagnosed, and that made quite a difference with the depression medication. Like there's different medications to deal with that, and so that's been a really good thing. In a way, like you don't really like a diagnosis like that, but it gave us a path forward. It became clear what some of the reasons were why things had been dealt with the way they had, or the stresses that they were under. Yeah, and so that was a good thing, and that was from the help that they'd got through psychiatrists and counselors. Yeah. So I know I was supposed to talk about our faith journey, and I did talk a little bit about us being United Church people. Like I'm a cradle United Church person, and my grandmother was there when the union happened in 1925, um, and that's who I am. My husband was born and raised Catholic in a Catholic community that had been settled by Roman Catholics. Um, and yet he was the one that was first able to use the new name and the pronoun, and be very protective with his friends and his sisters who you, the outlook is just different. Completely different way of dealing with gender issues growing up, but very open. And yeah, so in our family it was never considered a sin to be queer. um and so I'm glad that as parents we were able to come together and support our child. Um, Yeah, so our region, like a 40-mile square region, is steeped in Catholic dogma and then sprinkled with a good dose of fundamentalism in the past few years. So it's a pretty conservative area, um, and so that's and a challenge, but it's a challenge for everybody. So um, one thing we found out was that not all United Churches are affirming, even though 1988 we said we all were. It was a bit of a top-down movement, and not every congregation picked up mantle and ran with it. And so, in my head, I thought all United Churches were affirming. I didn't know there was such a thing as Affirm United at that time, but at the time that Andre came out. But we found out when Andre went away and tried to join a church in North Vancouver that wasn't accepting of their pronouns and those sorts of things. And I think that's maybe what started us on our journey then here in our town at our United Church, which is about 100 active members. We went on the journey of becoming an affirming ministry and just got that passed, and we had our celebration on Sunday. But I can see how churches can be a scary place for trans people, the non-binary people. And even though you promise, like you work and you promise and you try to train your members, you are always afraid that someone will walk in the door and not feel welcome us again, like to the church again. And so it's an ongoing long-term project to be an affirming faith and yeah, to trust, for people to trust. So yeah, I don't really have much else. Just we I guess our responses over the years have been to people who don't quite know what to make of us, and all the time that Andre was coming out, figuring things out, dyeing their hair, wearing clothes that other girls weren't wearing. um we were pretty quiet and people were pretty polite. Nobody really said much. But in 2018, I was invited by CBC Radio to do an article about being a parent of a child, and they it was great. I wrote the article, Andre approved it, they edited it, and it came out, and it was really quite well received, and people saw it all over Canada. And then there was radio interviews and things after that. And the thing about that is that it was a coming out for us as parents. Yeah, because it told our story all at once. It was like, if you want to know what's going on, this is what it is. And so I didn't really realize it was going to be like that, but it was a good thing. And so our responses to people who don't quite know what to make of us, there are three of them. One of them is that we share our truth with friends and family that we trust. The second is that we matter-of-factly respond to questions about what gender our children are, as that's a topic of conversation with new people that you meet, and my husband said, well, we have one of each, we have three. And, anyway, he just jokingly said that, but it kind of works, and then it opens the conversation, right? And then if they want to know more, we ask, and lots of times people don't. They're just like, oh, and they move on. And the third thing that we've had to do is distance ourselves from those who use the Bible as a weapon and an excuse for hatred and misunderstanding. And that's tough, friends you've had for years and years and years, and you just can't be there. Yeah. So we're slowly, quietly becoming advocates for change and understanding. We're trying to create safer spaces in our community. And yeah, and then I already mentioned about becoming an affirming ministry. So that is one thing that's tangible that came out of that advocacy. So thanks. I hope I didn't use more than 15 minutes.
That's wonderful. No, thank you so much, Allison, for sharing. I already have lots of things I want to talk about, but no, I would love for us to hear from Colleen.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for coming and for inviting me to be here. My story is a little different than Allison. My child is an adult child, and they came out as transgender, non-binary in the early 20s. They had come out to me before about liking women instead of men. My child was born female, but is transgender, non-binary. Both the times where I was told of these things by my child, whose name is Jillian James, and they too changed their middle name because they're very proud of their given name of Jillian. but changed their middle name to James, which is interesting because had Jillian been born male, their middle name would have been James at that time. And they didn't know that. And that's the name they chose. So happy coincidence. I was never surprised when Jillian spoke to me. It was just like, okay, thank you, good. And we carried on. And whatever the kind of support that Jillian needed and wanted, it was provided. Jillian came out first, probably, I don't know in what order, but myself, their siblings, and their very close friends. So it was safe places and was accepted all across those places. And that's been, for the most part, I think, very good for Jillian. Interesting, Alison, that you said that your husband says, I have one of each, because that's what I always say too. And I love to say that because then people's faces, like, it takes them a minute to figure it out. And then I like to say, would you like me to tell you what that means? And it does. It opens up the conversation. So I have one of each, transgender, non-binary, a son and a daughter. So I feel very fortunate to have all three of those children in my life. So yes, when Jillian told me, Jillian plans things out themselves and gets all the information and every aspect, and then makes the choices and go forward. So when Jillian came to me and said, Mom, I'd like gender affirming surgeries. I need you to go and talk to psychiatrists about this so that I can go through the hoops of getting the I don't like the word diagnosis, but anyways, of gender dysphoria, because that's what you needed to do in order to get blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long process. So I just went, sure, that's great. Let's do that. So our journey has really started there because parenting Jillian when they were younger, I always wanted to parent my children for who they were. And so that didn't matter what it was. What were you interested? What did you want to participate in? How did you want to dress? None of that mattered to me. If they could tell me what it was they wanted to do, then they could do that. So I don't know what it would have been like if Jillian had come out earlier and what that would have been. I have no idea, but so I can't talk to that. That's not our journey. I do want to say that lessons learned, that even though in our household and in our family we have people in the I'm going to use the word queer community. I'm sorry if that some people don't like that. I find it easier, so that's my instead of the letters and numbers. And so we talked about it very openly from birth onwards, that this was normal and there was other ways of being in this world. And I wanted it to be that way in case it's hereditary, genetic, in case this happened for one of my children. And even with that openness, as much as I thought it was open, it was still very difficult for Jillian to tell me when they first came out and said they liked girls. And that was done in the middle of the night with, I could tell, fear and trepidation. And that's not what I wanted. I don't know how else to do it differently, but I hope that perhaps it was a little bit easier, that they would understand that I would love them no matter what. But it was still hard for them to come out. Anyway, that was one of the lessons learned at that journey. So our journey together, really, which we've been doing hand in hand since Jillian is said they are transgender, non-binary, and wanted gender affirming surgery. And so we have been trying to plow down the roadblocks. They're not hoops to jump through. They're absolute concrete walls to get these kind of surgeries, medical help, understanding all of this, the mental challenges, and it is incredible. So that has been our journey together. In 2015, Jillian put in a human rights complaint, and that took 7.5 years to be resolved. Happily, it was resolved in, I believe, November of 2022 in our favor. The rights of transgender people and gender affirming surgery is better. It's getting better. It still has lots of ways to go, but since that time when Jillian asked for it and it was denied, to now is great. And we still have a lot of work to do, but it's a step in a really good forward motion anyways, in my view. So that has been something for us. And along that journey, what I've learned as well is to say my direct thanks and gratitude and acknowledge those institutions and people who have been affirming along the way. So thank you to the Saskatchewan Medical Association for years back, passing resolutions that went to the government and the health saying, you need to be doing this gender medical things, a variety of things. So that was wonderful. That was before we even did our human rights, and that really helped us along. Every time I go into a place that has non-gendered washrooms, I tell as many people who work there, thank you, how about that? When I see where you could have non-gendered washrooms, I go and I talk to whoever I can to say, have you thought about, could you do this? You know, it's really hard. So it's those kind of things. Here in Saskatoon, the community clinic is the most amazing place in the world with doctors who are so affirming and welcoming, and they really know what's going on. So there's those places. And so if people can find those little places to sort of help you as you trudge along in this journey, then it's really, really helpful. So when Jillian was denied access to gender affirming ministry to be paid through the Saskatchewan government, that's when the human rights complaint went in. And so we were working through the process. And then one day I had a phone call and Jillian was in not a good place. And it wasn't the first time. And so when I went to them, I said, that's it. We're not waiting anymore. I don't care how much it costs us. We're going, we're paying for it, and we're doing it now. And I thought, to heck with anything else, because my child was in such need for their body to match who they are inside that it was really tearing them apart. And I wasn't willing to allow that to happen anymore. So I am thankful that we as a family were in a place to be able to pay for that. And not everybody has that ability. And that is very sad. And it was very hard for Jillian to go and do that because they recognized the inequity in that. And Mom, it's not fair that I get to go. But what about my friend who wants the same thing and don't have the resources? Almost didn't go because of that inequity. It was so strong in them to hold firm for everybody. Anyways, we did. We went to Mississauga, had the gender affirming surgery. Jillian had their breasts removed in the way that they wanted. I learned lots about the different ways you can have your breasts removed in case anybody's really interested. And I think the biggest joy for me and blessing was for me to be with Jillian during that process. And after the surgery was over, a couple of days later, we had to go back to the surgeon so that they could check to make sure everything was in good order and things were draining properly and all those kind of things. And so we got into the doctor's office and Jillian undid their shirt and they looked down at their chest and they said, it's flat. And the utter and most wonderful joy, that's how I read it, joy at my body matches me, finally. And so Jillian doesn't have to wear a binder. Jillian doesn't have to wear 3 shirts anymore to disguise. Jillian just go one shirt. Jillian go to the pool. I mean, oh my goodness, for me to experience that with them, to finally everything came together. It was amazing, absolutely incredible, amazing. So that's my biggest story, and I love. And Jillian is still determined to work for the justice of all people for what they need, and I'm very happy to work with them along the way. One other lesson learned that I would like to share is that these individuals need an advocate. They can't do it on their own. There is so much mental stress and challenge just figuring themselves out in the world and how to be in this world that others them, let alone having to fight against the injustices of these worlds. So if you have somebody that you know of, please take their hand, find out what you can do. So Jillian's friend found out what are the forms that I need to do in order to change my names properly. And I would take the forms to Jillian and we would fill them out together and send them in. It was too much energy for Jillian to do that process. So anything that we can do to lessen that load on these individuals, the better off they're going to be and we're going to be, because I have learned so much and so thankful for this journey that I've had with my child. So I know it's supposed to be termed of faith-based ideas. As Sean and I were talking about this, I don't really think about it as my faith. I'm a mother. This is my child. I love them. End of story. But I have to also recognize that I was brought up in the church and in faith. That to me, the message I received, God loves all people unconditionally. We are all God's children, and there is no difference. And so I think that has bolstered and kept me through all of this as well. I have to say, I get really annoyed with religious institutions, and my own included. The exclusion that happens, the judgment that happens, the non-inclusive language. Oh my goodness, people, we are not just brothers and sisters in Christ. Please, we have just left out a whole slew of people. So let's use words like siblings and God the creator and the lover and all those things. And it makes it easier for me to really be fully present in my religious institution that I go to. If we can do that, it's a simple, easy thing that welcomes all people. So I think that's all I wanted to share. Thank you very much for listening and for the time.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I get a little teary there with your story in a good way. Tears of joy. So thank you. Lynn, I'll invite you to share your story now.
All right. So I'm going to start off by just sharing Robin's gender journey, because I think, as already has been shared, this journey is not static. And Kayko, we haven't talked for a while. My trans son is now my genderqueer kid. All right. So Robin's gender journey. In June 2018, at the end of grade 6, on our way to the Pride Parade, Robin came out to me as gender fluid, asexual, and panromantic, and I had no idea what any of those terms meant. They changed their name, and 2 months later, they changed it again when they came out as trans male and socially transitioned as Connor, using he, him pronouns just a few weeks before starting grade 7. That fall, we asked our family doctor to refer Robin to gender affirming care, which they were able to access within a few months. We have an exceptional family doctor, and we were very impressed that we were able to receive this care fairly quickly. So Robin's desire at that time was to start testosterone, but they were too young. But the gender affirming doctor offered them period blockers to stop their menstrual cycle. Oh, so Robin was assigned female at birth. I thought I should maybe start with that. So in September 2020, so a few years later, when they began grade 9, we legally changed their name to Connor and their gender marker from F to M. And the motivation at this time was we're helping them fill out their application for driver training. And I realized I did not want my child to have another piece of ID with their dead name on it. So I thought this was the time to start that process. And then in February 2021, at age 16, they were able to begin testosterone. So since then, they've been injecting themselves every 2 weeks. And then a year after that, Robin expressed a desire to get top surgery, and they were referred in March 2022. They saw a surgeon 2 months later, and in September 2022, they had top surgery, so just shy of their 17th birthday. So I was a little disheartened, Colleen, to hear that your child had such a hard time with that. So up until that time of top surgery, they've been wearing a binder, and Colleen mentioned that it's a garment that compresses the breasts for about 4 years. and binding can cause permanent damage to people. So in November 2022, a couple months after top surgery, Robin came out as genderqueer, and that's when they changed their name to Robin and started using they them pronouns. And they've been Robin and they them for the last 2 years, or a year and a bit, I guess. And then at that time, they also opted to reduce their testosterone dosage to maintain a more androgynous look. So they were told they also wanted to remove their uterus and fallopian tubes and ovaries and cervix and whatnot, but they had to wait till they're 18 to get on the surgical wait list. And they turned 18 in December. And I actually believe the referral went in last May, and we actually just spoke with the doctor this past week. So Robin is officially on the wait list, and they were told it'd be about a year for that surgery. And it's important to note that not every gender diverse person chooses the physical transitions that Robin did, but I have been very grateful and pleasantly surprised at the medical care, the gender affirming care that we've been able to access in Regina. So now I start with the more the meaty stuff. So my journey with Robin, I'll talk a bit about that, and then I am going to talk a bit about their experience at school and at church as well. So when Robin came out to me that day on our way to the Pride Parade, I had no idea what gender fluid, asexual, panromantic meant. And they also told me their new name was Charlie. And I didn't like that name. And I didn't like that my kid made this decision without inviting me into the conversation. And I had no idea how my kid knew what these things were when I didn't have a clue what they were. So this caused a lot of stress between us in those first few months as we were navigating this. And surprised does not begin to describe the emotions I felt. I was shocked because there wasn't any gender disconnect that I had ever seen or picked up on. There's a lot of confusion about what were these terms and how did my 12-year-old know what these terms were. I felt betrayed, and I also felt inadequate. Why didn't my child come to me with their struggles? My dad was gay, and we were very open with my kids about that. We loved Grandpa. We accepted Grandpa. We visited Grandpa. There was nothing. My dad chose to be in the closet, but in the family, we were open about it. So I puzzled as to why Robin felt we wouldn't accept them. And then, of course, I felt fear. What would the future hold for my child? What would people at church think? And how was I supposed to tell them? And of course, in a public position like a pastor, people are always asking about your family, which is kind of them, right? But it's also hard to say over and over and over again. So we had no idea that Robin had been struggling with their gender identity, but we did know that they were struggling with something since puberty. Prior to Robin coming out, we navigated the challenges of depression, anxiety, social isolation, self-harm, and suicidal thinking. And for those first 2 or 3 months after Robin came out, they weren't willing to talk to us or confide in us, or maybe they just simply weren't able to. So it was an extremely difficult time, desperately wanting to support our kid and just not knowing quite how to do that. But I knew I needed support to navigate the road ahead so I could be as equipped as possible to support Robin. So I sought out support and information and searched out people who could connect us with organizations and resources. And the first person I reached out to was Robin's teacher, who referred me to someone in the transgender community and a transgender organization. And this person offered this advice to us. They said, forget the counseling, get them involved in a queer, like an LGBTQ youth group where they can meet other LGBTQ youth. And So I connected Robin to a sexually and gender diverse youth group. And in the process, I met a lot of adults and youth at part of this community, and I learned a lot just hearing their stories and having conversations with them. And I also reached out to the folks at UR Pride and I had so many questions, and I shared my struggles, and it was helpful for me to hear their personal experiences. And they recommended books and parent support resources and movies and TV shows that had LGBTQ representation. So Robin and I watched a lot of those together, and that was really good for us. And we also read a lot of the same books. Like I started reading fiction books about gender diverse characters because I thought if my kid isn't able to share with me what they're experiencing and going through, then I'll read a fictional character who can maybe share that with me. And then Robin would see me reading these books, and then they'd say, Mom, can I read that when you're done? And then it was a very unintimidating way. I could say, oh, well, so Riley in this book experienced this and was thinking that. Is that how it was for you? And they would say, well, yes, in this way, or no, it was more like this. And then it just really was instrumental in facilitating conversation between us. And then through all the reading I did, the most important quote I came across was, and it comes from a book called The Transgender Child, a handbook for families and professionals. And it says, the single most important factor in promoting lifelong health and well-being for your child is creating a supportive home environment. Parental acceptance is the #1 determining factor for long-term outcomes for gender variant and cross-gender children and teens. Providing a safe and supportive home environment gives them a buffer from the hardships that they might face outside the home and reinforces a strong sense for them as someone lovable and good. So after I read that, there was no question that I would move heaven and earth to support my child. And as I demonstrated support of Robin's outward gender transition, they began to open up to me. And then as I shared Robin's gender identity with my ministry partner, and then the staff at the church I serve and the church council, and select people that had closer contact with them, and eventually the congregation, we experienced nothing but acceptance and support. And then 4 years later, there was a second coming out, because whenever our kids come out, us parents have to come out. I mean, no, we don't have to, but when people ask you about your kids, right? And this did feel a little more challenging because people aren't as familiar with what genderqueer means. And but it did provide an opportunity for some education. Congregational members were, on the most part, very good at remembering when Robin was using the he, him pronouns as Connor. And I do notice it's more challenging for them to use they, them, and they often fall back on he, him. Sometimes they correct themselves, sometimes they don't. I don't bother correcting them because they're using the correct name and I believe that they're trying. So for school, Robin initially came out at the end of grade 6, and then just before school started, I sent an email to the administration. And then within 24 hours, I got an email back, and they had invited me to a meeting with the school administrators and guidance counselor and school superintendent. And they all advocated for Robin's name change and choice of bathroom use, and introduced us to a Minister of Education document called Deepening the Discussion that advocated for education and the rights of sexually and gender diverse students. But what I thought was an excellent document, unfortunately, has recently been changed since the fall, since the government's recently policy change on pronouns. And then Robin and I met with their grade 7 teacher, and we discussed how to share this information with Robin's classmates. And Robin was asked to name 2 safe people that they could go to if they're ever bullied. And I'm happy to say that Robin never needed to use those people. So I really experienced the school system as going above and beyond for Robin to feel safe and accepted. And their high school years have been equally affirming and full of involvements in band and choir and musicals. And they're also an honor roll student. And I've been very proud of how our church family has accepted Robin and their gender transitions. And I believe that that acceptance has helped Robin experience, that Robin has experienced and has helped them embrace their faith and their church family. And the Bible reading that Robin chose as her confirmation verse, I think reflects their firm belief that they're a child of God. And it's from Isaiah chapter 64, verse 8. Still, God, you are our parent. We're the clay, and you're our potter. All of us are what you made us. So, and then just to conclude with some general reflections, since Robin came out, we've always strived to be intentionally proactive in navigating school and church involvements in terms of being open about Robin's gender identity and having helpful conversations when it comes to bathroom use or overnight arrangements. And just as an aside, we had a forward-thinking parish worker before Robin came out who made signs around the church, and we have male and female bathrooms on the main level of the church, but on the second level in our fellowship hall, we had an additional bathroom that used to be an exclusively women's bathroom, but it was decided to make it a gender neutral bathroom and have the signage. And I remember looking at the signage and thinking, when are we going to ever have a trans person at Christ Lutheran? Do we really need this bathroom? And then, so little did I know, my kid would be the first trans person that I know of that used that bathroom. And one of my other reflections is that I'm fully aware that our privilege has helped pave the way for Robin because our family is white and we're educated and we have the intellectual and emotional and social and communication skills to seek out the information, have the conversations, and the resources to advocate for Robin. And through getting to know many of Robin's friends and our oldest child's friends who are part of the sexually and gender diverse community, I know firsthand that not all youth are this fortunate. So Robin has come a long way in the last 6 years, and so have we as a family. And I've met many inspiring people in the sexually and gender diverse community in Regina and this province. And through this community, I see a community that loves and supports each other and is committed to making the world a more inclusive and accepting place, not unlike what we are striving for within the church as well. And as I've journeyed with Robin, I've also discovered that I'm not invested in my kids' genders. I don't care what gender they are or aren't. What I care about is that I have a good relationship with them and that they feel loved and supported and that they're good and kind people contributing to the world around them. And that's our story.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody. I want to give you all big hugs. So there's a lot of different things that I've heard, and I'm probably going to circle back to quite a number of them. But one of the things that I've heard has to do with the challenge of parenting a child who's trans or non-binary when the system generally is hard to navigate, and the advocacy work that needs to be done, and the sort of mothers are vigilant over our children to begin with, but there's kind of an added level of vigilance, of fear I've heard some of you talking about. And I'm wondering if any of you can say anything about how your faith might have sustained you through this process, because it's not easy, or if there's other things that you have found to be sustaining, to give you the strength to go out and fight again, and the strength to let go when you have to let go, and to navigate the whole system. And you can just unmute and just jump in.
Well, Lynn, I would just like to say that when you talked about the people you met through Robin's groups that they joined, the gender diverse groups that they joined, I think that's been the gift to us is that the people that we've met along the way, coming from such a small town, there was no such thing as a support group around here at all. And actually, Andre ended up going 30 miles to the next town and doing grade 11 and 12, so that friend group kind of expanded a little bit. So they found people there who were on the same journey, and we found those parents. And then as we met people through these church groups that we talked about, like we met some of the ministers or some of the youth group leaders, and yeah, that part has been a gift. I think is the other people that you meet who are sharing the journey or in there already. And for us, I think that was a really big thing that sustained us. And that you go on the next day and you try and make things a little better for the people that are there, because I keep thinking about if for our child, they had the support of the parents, they had the child of this or they had the support of the church, they had the people, like grandparent like people in the church that were just like, oh yeah, hello, and just kind of smiled at the new color hair or whatever. And I think that was what made me want to get involved in the local pride group and to start the affirming, because I thought not every child is as lucky as ours was to have those things. And Andre says that themselves, that I'm under no illusion that it could have gone quite a bit differently than it did. Anyway, that's that. It's the people, it's the community that you meet, I think.
And I've discovered, in terms of faith sustaining me, there's been a definite shift in my faith towards a social justice focus, which I did not feel a strong call to before Robin came out. But since learning more about the gender and sexually diverse community and being directly involved in advocating for Robin and having those conversations and educating myself, and then I've also seen, we went to where we live, we went to I think it was shortly after the unmarked graves and Kamloops were found, and we went to a rally type thing, and we saw so many people from the gender and sexually diverse community, and I looked around and I didn't see anybody I knew from the church community. And that's when I realized, well, when I had this reflection that minority groups really stand up for minority groups, and us people who are white and privileged don't always do our part. And it just motivated me to just educate myself further, and just motivated me to be more social justice oriented and educate myself in that way. And then my faith has also sustained me. Well, just this, I mean, Jesus' example. And then that's the whole social justice angle too. I mean, Jesus was there with the marginalized and the vulnerable, and that's what the church is called to do as well. So
yeah, thanks. Colleen, did you want to add anything? No, you want to pass. Yeah, thank you from that. Well, so this is a bit of a follow-up question. My experience with my own child, we live in Alberta, and so we're facing same policies as Saskatchewan, some stricter policies than Saskatchewan, and a lot of Christian fundamentalists have been very active in sort of getting these policies into place and shutting down discussions around sexuality and gender diversity. And so my own experience is that my child has kind of looked at the church, and she's never had a bad experience in church. She's always been welcomed. But yet when I say Christians, she just kind of goes, stay away from me. And so, it's a difficult to navigate that. I'm wondering, is for yourselves, are your own children still connected to church, or they have just kind of gone like, you guys are okay, but them out there, I don't want anything? What's been the experience in your family?
I can answer that very quickly. When my children could choose not to go to church anymore, they pretty much chose not to go to church. They do come if I ask them to, or if there's some special occasion, they will. So they still have that grounding in our Christian faith, such as it is. And I don't think it's because of necessarily exclusion. I mean, there's some of that probably keeps them away sometimes, but there's things beyond just that keeps my children from not being part of the church community on a regular basis.
Mm.
Robin really embraced their faith, in terms of, and I think it partly it's because of being so accepted. So they went to Clay. They were active in youth group. They helped out with the Sunday school. They served as a youth delegate to the virtual Sask Synod convention. So I think they still feel quite connected to the church, but in the past year with other involvements, they've been choosing not to come to church, but still, I think faith is an important part of their life. And they are not afraid to speak publicly about their faith, or they like telling people I'm a pastor.
My three children, as I said, were quite involved, even as young adults, the older two for sure. But I wouldn't say that they attend regularly now. Our daughter probably stuck with it the longest and led youth group and things till she was about 28. But Andre has been, it's interesting because she will, or they will do anything for the church that we belong to. Like on Sunday, we had our affirming ministry celebration. Well, they came back and did a reading, and they were happy to celebrate with us. But otherwise, I don't think in the city that they live in, they're involved in a church. But church people are some of their favorite people, because of the connections that they have. And like Colleen said, it isn't necessarily to do with exclusion. It's to do with, is the church relevant to young people these days? Are you doing things that are relevant, like social justice work and sort of things? So yeah, it's an interesting,
Mhm.
it's interesting times for young people.
Yeah,
Can I
for
just
sure.
say
Yeah.
though that even if somebody, like you're saying, it's not relevant, but if somebody can't see themselves in the way that we present our faith and the way we talk about it, if they can't see themselves to be part of that or be included in that, why would you come?
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. I think that was something, because last Sunday, the church we were attending last Sunday was close to Pi Day. No, Sunday before last was close to Pi Day. They had a service for Pi Day, so public, intentional, explicit. And they were there for that. And they said, wow, this is amazing. I go to church and I know they're affirming and I know they love me, but to have this public, intentional, explicit, get up there. The sermon is about welcoming trans people, the songs, the hymns, the prayers. It's like you said, Colleen, it's not like they've ever been in a place that it's exclusive, but to be in somewhere that's explicitly inclusive of them makes a big difference, really makes a difference. And of course, then, as parents, we also feel like, well, we're welcome as well, because there's always that connection there. Um, I have so many questions, but I guess here's a question that I think I'd like to hear from you on. So a lot of provinces now have these various policies on pronouns in schools, and whether or not children's pronouns should be shared with their parents, mandatory. In Alberta, we're having discussions of blocking hormones for anybody under the age of 18. And I'm wondering, in your opinions, what is the role, or what should be the role of the church in relationship with these government policies? Is this, something churches should be active about? Is it something churches should step back on and let it, not let it happen, but let citizens kind of take the lead? What are your thoughts on all of this?
I would love to see the church take a lead in terms of advocating for, you know, the marginalized and the vulnerable, but I also know the reality. And even in the church I serve, people are very reluctant to certainly be politically public about some of these opinions.
I agree with Lynn. And so sometimes because in a congregation or in a faith tradition, never agree on anything. There's always a diversity in thought patterns. So if a church can actually come right out and say something, then I think it becomes incumbent on me and other individuals to come out and say something and be explicit about the reason where I'm coming from. I coming from the faith tradition, Christian tradition, and this is why I'm speaking out, and this is why it's important. Um, yeah, I think it's difficult for a whole church, perhaps, maybe an affirming church or reconciling in Christ can do it. We don't have really the Anglican thing quite yet. I think there is that option then, and I think if you have said, I am a reconciling in Christ, or I am an affirming church, then you should be stepping forward as that individual church to say unacceptable.
Yeah, I agree. But we are so new at this, right? And I can just imagine writing a letter and taking it to council and saying, "Let's sign it." Um, yeah, it's challenging. And I think as individuals, what's challenging sometimes is that for us to come out as Christians when so much of the rhetoric is, from the extreme right fundamental churches promoting this, these parental rights and pronoun rules. It's like we're not like that. Like we're Christians, but we're not like that. And so there's a whole bunch of how do we differentiate ourselves as different? Because lots of times, oh, that's just another Christian talking, and they don't like gays, and they don't, and so it's, boy, I don't know. It would be nice if we could solve that. Like, how do we stand out? How do we make what we believe, that everyone is welcome and God is fully inclusive? How do we make that clear? Um,
But if we as Christians who believe that, Allison, don't say anything and we stay quiet, we don't do ourselves any service either. So whether we have the right way to do it or it actually works one time and it doesn't the next, like for me, I just have to keep saying it. I can't do anything else because it's my child whose well-being is at risk here. And then it's not only my child, but all those other people who are following. So, but I hear
Yeah.
the challenge. I get it.
yeah. Well, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I read the news and I think, I hope my child didn't read the news, because it's so harmful sometimes. Yeah. So
Yeah. Thank you, Allison. Yeah. For those of you who are sort of attending and don't, the panel's been talking about statistics about depression and suicide. And so the Trevor Project did some research, gosh, I want to say 15 or 16 or 17 years ago, where they surveyed gender nonconforming, non-binary, trans teenagers, and they realized that the percentage of that group who had either had suicidal ideation or attempted something was 64% of of that population, which is a stunningly high number. Subsequently, they did another survey and they found out that when individuals in that group have at least one supportive adult in their life, so whether that's a family member or a church member or a teacher, that number drops to 4%, which is actually lower than the general average net percentage of teenagers who experience suicidal ideation. So there's definitely that, the fear going in of what's going to happen to my child, but then also that reassurance of having one supportive person, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's, a friend's parent. It makes such a stunning difference. So I want to end our panel discussion by asking you, what have you learned from your non-binary child about just being in the world?
The only way you can be in the world is to be yourself. And Jillian stands very firm and solid for most part. And I'm sorry, Lynn, to interrupt there. Be yourself. That's the only way you can be, because you can't be anything else. So share that with the world. Share those uniquenesses, and then people will share that back. And we're going to have then a colorful, bright, interesting world if everybody can come to the table.
I've since like watching Robin's figuring out their gender, and now that they're have understand themselves as gender queer, it's been refreshing for me to have the male female binary kind of explode or shatter, and it's been refreshing and beautiful, and yeah, just through Robin, they've opened me up to this world of sexual and gender diverse people who are, I strive to be them in being non-judgmental and accepting, like regardless of a person's appearance and gender expression. And it's been beautiful.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things I learned from our Andre is that people say normal, and actually normal, I think it's a bad word. Like it, we are all unique, and I think that's what I've learned is that there is no normal. There is everyone exists in the world in a different way, and that we need to be willing to see people as they are, and that they live their true authentic self. So but yeah, I have a friend who has MS, and she's been in a wheelchair for about 30 years, and she talked about not being normal, and I said, oh Maureen, there's nothing there's like, normal's not a real word. Like, we all exist the way that we do in this life. So
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone. That's this learning of radical acceptance from our children. It's almost like someone else we learn radical acceptance from. Well, I think we are coming to the end. I want to introduce, for those of you who don't know, who are looking for resources, there are two books here that I just want to draw people's attention to. The first one is by Austin Hart Key, and it's called Transforming the Bible and the Lives of Transgender Christians. This one is, because I'm an academic, so I have to say this, was published in 2023 by Westminster John Knox Press. And it has actually a study guide at the end of it. So people who want to do Bible studies in their churches on this issue. So it's really helpful for that, for those who are looking for. And then this other book is called Raising Kids Beyond the Binary, and Celebrating God's Transgender and Gender Diverse Children. And the author is Jamie Brusahoff, who is Lutheran, and she is the wife of a Lutheran pastor in the States. So they're both Lutheran, and they have a trans child. And so her book is a bit more of kind of a memoir and stories about her own experience, but specifically from a faith perspective, and sort of a theological Lutheran piece around children. So I just wanted to raise those up for people who would be interested. And then Sean, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kayko, Dr. Kayko. And we did invite actually Jamie, and she was very interested in the event that we were putting on tonight. She was booked like a year in advance. So Colleen, Lynn, Allison, thank you so much for being part of this, for accepting our invitation. Yes, so round of applause on the Zoom. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your faith, sharing the challenges, also sharing the joys, sharing those moments of euphoria, right? Gender euphoria, spiritual euphoria, relational euphoria. It's just wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. And Dr. Kayko, thank you for shepherding this fine group. It was you always do it so well. And everybody, thank you for coming out tonight and for being part of this. As I mentioned earlier, this is our final webinar for the Year of Intention. It's been a really interesting and wild ride over this past year. And I know there's been a number of folks who are here tonight who have been at multiple of the sessions. There is going to be one more, and I'm just throw it in the chat, not a webinar, but our final, not final, because it's not final. This journey goes on, but a moment to celebrate and to recommit to the journeys that we are on together as theological schools and as this community. And so there's some details there. You will probably have seen this invitation in other places. Mark it in your book. If you're able to come in person to chapel on April 4th, you're welcome to come. If you want to stay for lunch, there's going to be a light lunch and celebration afterwards. Send me an email so I can get you on the RSVP list to get you into lunch. It's also going to be in hybrid form. So if you're elsewhere from Saskatoon, feel free to zoom in and take part. And yes, Dr. Kayko says also a reminder, Easter Sunday is also Trans Day of Visibility. Yes, whose body transitioned more than Christ in the resurrection. That is an awesome way to go forth from this place. So thank you. God bless and keep you, and may they look upon you with graciousness and peace always. Amen.
If you'd like to learn more about any of our programs, please reach out to the College Recruitment Officer. The link is in the video notes below. And do feel free to like and share this video to spread the word. Peace and blessings be with you.